This week's Player of the Week goes to Carter Kanenberg of the 4- and 5-year-old goal getters. During play, the ball got kicked, and the ball inadvertently hit Carter in the head, providing a headshot. And though while initially shocked, he held his hand on his head because it hurt. But what he didn't know was that in using his head, he actually made a great defensive stop. So Carter, great job on using your head. You are this week's Player of the Week.
This week's Lasso Works Cedar Coach of the Week for the LC is Paula Waters with the 4- and 5-year-old Pandas. Paula is an extremely good coach. She is on the field with her kids, extremely patient, positive, works with them so well. Paula, you have just done a great job this season, and your working with kids is phenomenal. Thank you so much on behalf of Lasso and the LC. You are our Coach of the Week.
All right, welcome to episode 25. This is Winning with the Home Team. I'm Katrina.
I'm Todd.
And thanks for listening in. Our last podcast was, it was something special. We got to talk to your, like a second mom to you, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, Miss Debbie.
Yeah.
And man, just the way that you walked us through that conversation with toughness and what it looks like to be tough was huge.
Yeah.
So this week we're going to, backpedal a little bit and just kind of define toughness. Todd, what are your thoughts initially on toughness?
So growing up as a boy,
yes,
when you think toughness, you think strong. You think someone who is not intimidated by anything, that you can, you get as many muscles as you can.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's that whole imagery of just being the strong. Like I think about I used to watch the strongman competitions. Did you ever watch those when I was a kid? Oh, I did, and they're sawing the logs and they're doing, just picking stuff up and carrying them. And, it's like, okay, that's tough, So that's what I think about, or what I did think about as a kid growing up.
Yeah. So, I went to Webster for this, for the definition of toughness.
The dictionary guy.
The dictionary guy. Dictionary guy.
Yeah.
What's the other Webster?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Went to the dictionary, pulled up Google and typed definition of toughness. And this is what it said. It said, the ability to deal with hardship or cope in difficult situations. The ability to deal with hardships or cope in difficult situations. And again, if this is your first time listening to us, we take a drastically different approach when talking about character virtues. We strive to be tough, right? But just in a different way.
Yeah. So by your definition, when I ask my son to take the trash out, he feels like he's dealing with a hardship and has to get through it. So he thinks that he's tough, right? So
to be sure.
Yeah.
To be sure, that's what he thinks. And when Taya woke up 2 days ago at 6:15 in the morning, and the first thing she said to me as she flailed her arms and said, "Mom, not again, not school, not again." So she definitely, by Webster's definition, she definitely was trying to cope and deal with some difficult circumstances.
She's tough.
For sure. Yeah. But going along those same lines, what are some misconceptions about what toughness is? Like, we'll talk about what the world thinks that toughness is, i.e. Taya flailing her arms and saying, why.
Yeah.
And then, let's talk about what we think toughness is.
So I think the biggest one for me is reliance on self.
Yeah.
Right? Because the world will tell you, be tough, be stronger, be better. And all of that imagery in my mind is, what can I do to make myself tougher?
Yeah.
What can I do to make myself better?
Yeah.
And so it's self-reliance. It's all on my shoulders, right?
Yeah.
When the reality is, as we saw last week in the episode, being tough is all about being able to give it just surrender, right? And what's it's cliche to say it, but I'm strongest when I'm on my knees, right?
Yeah.
And so when I think of tough now as compared to, when I was a boy, it's completely different to me. It has nothing to do with what society tells me tough is now, because I've been the guy who's, watched someone dying. I've been the guy who has had to live through things that I would never wish on anybody else. And it has completely changed the way that I view what toughness is, because then you have to go and hold the hand of a relative and say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And man, that takes more toughness than I ever would have thought.
Yeah. And so something beyond yourself.
Absolutely beyond myself.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't have the capability to do it on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about toughness, I think about, let's go with me. Let's say that Taya is rollerblading or roller skating, and as she loves to do, and she falls down, and immediately my first response is, "You're okay. Get back up. Get back up."
Yeah.
And I mean, there's something to that. Like, I'm sure she's fine, right? But I've even heard myself say, I want to raise a tough kid.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard myself say that, and that's not a bad thing at all.
Right.
But when we talk about toughness today, I want us to define it in more of what God says toughness is, and then like how does that response, trickle down to parenting athletes, right? I will be the first to say that I absolutely. I was going to use the word suck, but I won't. I am getting better at what the definition says: the ability to deal with hardship or cope in difficult situations. Me and emotions. I'm not a very emotional person, and I'm sure a year in, Todd, with me, I'm sure you've picked that up.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah. And it's to my detriment, I would say.
I don't know. Maybe some, but
maybe some. He's admitting to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my pawpaw, I remember him. He's somebody that I looked up to, without doubt. He was, by worldly standards, a very tough man. He was a farmer. He was a truck driver, all those things. And emotion and communication, for that matter, didn't come naturally to him. And then, my mom, same thing, right? My dad, same thing. It's just kind of how they were raised. And honestly, that's how I was raised. Yeah. And so I'm getting better. I'm in the process of doing exactly what this definition says: the ability to deal with hardship or cope in difficult situations in the context of dealing with emotions in a very healthy way. Right.
Yeah, I think, I'm listening to what you're saying, and it's kind of hitting home with me a little bit, because I think things started to change for me a little bit when I had a daughter. So similar to you, like, I was raised in a house with mostly boys. It was just my mom and then my brother and my dad. My dad, firefighter.
Right.
I grew up in football, went into police work. It's you don't cry, you don't, you keep pushing on, you do what you got to do, right?
Is that like a man card type thing?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
it is. But you also have to be able to know when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And to treat people the right way.
Right.
But when I had a daughter, man, she was tough to raise, right? But I found myself going, you don't cry, and you get back out there and you do it again. Like, even more so for her, because I wanted to raise a daughter who did not have to rely on a boy when she got older, who didn't have to rely on that male, in her life. And so, she became sassy and she became all these things, and then as I watched her get older and older, I realized, oh my gosh, what have I created here, but I wanted her to be tough so she could be self-reliant. And then I thought, man, well, I'm kind of giving two ends of the spectrum here, because I'm telling her, be tough, so you don't have to rely on anybody else, but also rely on God.
Right.
And so you kind of have to go back and rethink, all right, what am I doing here? And I think that I've done a good job in the meantime of trying to explain to her, okay, look, this is really kind of what I'm trying to say here. But you fall into that trap, because people that you love, you don't want them to be taken advantage of.
Right.
And so, as growing up in a house full of guys, when you have that daughter, it's hard not to fall in that trap of trying to make her be
Yeah.
Tough enough to withstand this world that is not going to give her anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And even with Taya, like Taya has helped 100% helped me with this because Taya came out of the womb, not my womb.
Yeah.
Obviously not my womb because of just how she's wired, right? And she is very, she is in touch with her emotions, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I've had to learn that's not a bad thing at all. And I need to and not really embrace those emotions, but let her be okay with them. Let her be okay with them. And for someone that's not good with emotions, that causes tension internally within me. But I'm here to say that I'm getting better. So, when we think about toughness, when you biblically, I don't know that you can find any verses that talk about, toughness or tough.
Yeah.
But there are plenty that talk about strength and being strong.
Yeah.
Do you have a verse that you go to and you lean in on when it comes to being tough or strong, the Lord being strong?
So what comes to my mind, what I want to say is Samson, right? Like I want to say that's strength, right? I mean, we all know the Bible story of Samson, but the truth is, I think it's Matthew 16:15 where the question is asked, but who do you say I am? And it's Jesus posing that question, right? And so to me, when I think of that, it forces me to come up with some imagery of what God is, right? And so when I picture God, I don't picture God as this huge hulking figure that just is ready to step in and beat up anybody who gets in my way, because that's not who he is.
Yeah.
He is extremely tough because of who he is, because he's like a father figure, right? And so he's righteous, he's just, but he's also loving, and he's willing to sit there with me in, just the darkest moments. And that has nothing to do with muscles.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with strength. There's an inner strength there, but that has to do with him being willing to get in to the trenches with me and go through stuff and go through battles with me. To me, that's toughness.
Yeah.
And so when I hear the words in Matthew, who do you say that I am? That's who I say you are.
Yeah.
You're my loving God who is capable of anything, but also close enough to sit with me through anything.
Yeah. I love that. And as you were talking, I thought of two different character traits in regards to God, and that's he is one of humility, right? When you think about Jesus, like you said, like he is absolutely strong, right?
Yeah.
But he knows when to flex and when not to flex.
Yeah.
He knows when to step in and he knows he's even righteous and just even to the bad guys. Why? Because he loves the entire world, right? And so it's in humility that we see toughness played out, right? What does Jesus say and tell us to do? He tells us to love our enemies.
Right.
He tells us to turn the other cheek.
Yeah.
That's how he defines being strong and being tough. And that is so opposite of what we think.
Yeah.
The first and greatest commandment, love the Lord your God with all your soul, with all your heart, with all your mind, your strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself. Love is strength. Like for you to be able to love somebody, to love your enemies, to love those that you've had to deal with day in and day out when you were a police officer, to love those guys seems absolutely impossible aside from the strength that the Lord gives us.
Right. Do you know how much strength it takes to walk away from a fight, right? Like,
so much.
You do know. I mean, you deal with people on a daily basis, and there are times when you're like, Lord, forgive me because I'm not going to be able to turn the other cheek on this one, right? And the older I get, the more I realize that not just from a maturity standpoint, but from a toughness standpoint, what am I about to prove? Sometimes discretion is the better part of valor, right? And so you have to turn away.
Right.
And that's what God teaches. I like to think that I am completely capable of protecting my family, but also emotionally mature enough to know it's not worth it until it is absolutely necessary.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's what my boys that I'm raising see.
Yeah.
that you have to be mature enough to. I'm not saying be scared. I'm not saying turn away and be a coward.
Right.
Because no part of that is anything that I'm teaching them. But to know when it's right is an important piece.
Yeah. The other word that I think about as you were talking was confidence. Strength is found in the confidence of knowing who you are.
Yeah.
You mentioned, there's conflict that happens in sports all the time that we see in youth sports. And I had one, this past week where there was conflict and, someone was upset about something. And, as I listened to them, I understood that this had nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
And it also had nothing to do with the objects in which we were talking about.
Yeah.
Really, it had everything to do with just, that person's ability to process their insecurities.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And so when you think about being tough, a part of toughness and strength is really being able to have the confidence, like I'm sure you're teaching your boys, that you got to know who you are and know whose you are. And know that regardless of whatever is right in front of you that you're having to respond to, more than likely it has nothing to do with you.
Right.
It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when I recount the stories in the New Testament about Jesus and how much he pressed into just people that were hurting and needy, and while he could have taken all of that on, and just absolutely crumbled, I believe the reason why he was able to keep going was because, he tells us, he only sees what the Father is doing, right? And how often did Jesus get away, to go and find strength, toughness in the Lord?
Right.
I mean, time and time and time and time again.
Yeah.
Which leads me to a lot of Old and New Testament passages when it comes to strength. There's so many that the Bible is filled up with them. One is Psalm 118:14. The Lord is my strength. This is your boy David.
Yeah.
You
Love
like him a
David.
lot.
Yeah.
The Lord is my strength and my defense. He's become my salvation. David knew, he was a man that had many enemies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even still, he knew that it was the Lord that fought for him.
Isn't that perfect about what you're talking about? What a perfect example, because you're right. David had many enemies, a lot of his own doing.
Yeah.
Right. And he's a king. He's got all this power and he has so many resources available to him. But yet what we marvel at most is the Psalms, where he is literally saying, I'm nothing. God, fill me. And, and you hear later that, he's after God's own heart, right? And so David is able to say, yeah, I could do whatever I want. I'm pretty tough as a king, but I'm giving it all back to God, right? And that's just perfect to me.
For sure. Yeah. Another one, there's plenty in the Psalms. Another one in Isaiah, it's 40, verse 31. And it says, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. Renew their strength. So that means that strength is limited, right? Toughness is limited. But the guy of Isaiah says, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not become faint. So in that passage, what sticks out to me the most is that on a continual basis, like our strength, which is limited, needs to be renewed.
Yeah.
And when it is renewed, that's when we're able, and the renewal happens on God's part, right? And when that happens, then we're able to go out and do the things that God wants us to do.
Right. Right. And none of that is self-reliant.
None of it is. Yeah. None of it is. We have a limited capacity of energy and even of time. And to think that our life is ours to do what we want. If we think that, from a parent perspective and youth sports perspective, that our life is just, living through our kids and cheering them on and making sure that they get all of the training that they need and skills that they need and wins that they need and video clips and footage to go send to, the recruits, like it has nothing to do with us.
I was watching something the other day about this where it said that if you take the time to spend, 10, 15 minutes a day in scripture, and if you do that for a couple months, it really reworks the wiring in your brain.
The neuroplasticity.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so if you're doing that, and that is an example of us renewing our energy, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's taken us to a place where we can now go to functioning better.
Yep.
So it's scientific that God is
100%.
saying, come to me.
Yep.
Come to me and I'll give you rest.
Yeah.
And so I think it just goes back to we think about what toughness is, but if we surrender and go to him, man, I'm much tougher to deal with.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm saying, like I need that rest through him.
Yeah.
And if I give it up, then I get what I need.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to the confidence and the humility, right? Like if we're spending time, pressing into God and renewing our mind, like Romans says, then we do have the humility and the confidence to move forward in conflict.
Yes.
I think that's the essence of toughness, right? Like the definition was the ability to deal with hardships or cope in difficult circumstances. And if we don't have a clear mind and a mind that is able to be confident in who we are and who God is in our life, and then the feet to act in humility,
right?
Then we're a train wreck waiting to happen.
Agree.
Yeah,
Agree.
for sure. One more. It's Ephesians 6:10, and Paul says, "Finally," this is his end statement. "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might."
Yeah.
And that's powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's toughness.
Coming from someone who's been beaten to a bloody pulp, thrown in prison.
Yeah, exactly.
And just, faced the worst. And he's saying that, makes me want to listen a little closer.
So going back to our purpose, winning with the home team, how do we empower families to navigate youth sports? If we take it back to a sport level, or even to a parenting level, because if you're a sport parent, obviously you're parenting and you're doing all the kids stuff, right? Are we teaching our kids the right way to be tough?
If you're the parent that stands on the sideline and yells at your kid to suck it up and get back in the game, you're the parent that yells at the referee, and to the point where you want to go up to that dad and be like, do you even know this guy? Like, it's not personal. What's going to happen if Johnny fouls out of this game? He's not going to lose a scholarship, right? Like, being tough to me, when it comes to parenting, is being able, like I described that God is willing to do with me, if I'm able to get down in the trenches with my son and say, hey, you went 0 for 4 today at the plate. That's terrible, right? I know that's what you feel right now, but let's put this in perspective, right? You're hitting 300 for the year, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're not hitting well at all.
Yeah.
But it's a game, right? Let's put this in perspective. To me, being a tough parent means having conversations with your kids that are hard, but being loving while doing it.
Yeah.
Not standing on the sidelines screaming at them in front of everybody, not shaming them into what it is that you want them to do, but meeting them where they are and loving them exactly where they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's toughness to me. And I think our parents can learn a lot from their kids and what their kids are seeing and feeling if they would take the time to get down on their level.
Yeah. Yeah. Toughness is allowing your kids to fail. That's hard.
Tough. That's tough.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Why? Why is it so hard for us to watch our kids fail?
Because we know that it hurts them.
Yeah.
We know that that's something that is unpleasant.
Yeah.
We know that there's a better way. If you would have just done X, Y, and Z, actually, you wouldn't be in this scenario.
Yeah.
But toughness is realizing that we grow stronger as people when we face hardships and challenges.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we leave it up to our kids to figure it out on their own. I'm not saying that at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we've and listen, I have a 5-year-old, so I'm like barely there, by the way, okay? I'm barely there. So really, if anything, I think I'm preaching to myself right now.
Yeah.
But if we allow our kids to fail, and that allows for opportunities, for growth, and to talk things out, and to give them hope. And it allows for opportunities for them to go back to God, to take them back to what the Bible says about strength and about challenges and about failure, because there are plenty of examples of failure in the Bible.
Yeah.
The Bible is just a bunch of stories about, God's people that failed.
Yeah.
And how Jesus came and redeemed all of those failures.
Yeah.
And so if we don't allow our kids to face adversity, they're not going to get strong. If we're just saving them time and time and time again, there's no redemption in that. There's no growth in that.
You're right. And I can't imagine a world in which my kids made it through high school, went to college, and never experienced any kind of failure. And now they're out of the nest living in college. God only knows how they're gonna react when they fail in college at something, whether it's socially or academically or athletically. And so not that I root for my kids to fail, but man, what a beautiful moment when something does go wrong and I get to sit beside them and talk through it with them, because not only are they learning a lesson, but it gives me a chance to bond with them, to let them know no matter what happens from here on out, I'll meet you right where you're at and we'll talk through it.
Yeah. And listen, going back to my background with my pawpaw and my mom and dad, and how, emotion and communication, it didn't come naturally. Right. So I'm literally, as we go, I'm learning. And I think it's important, I'll just even speak for me, it's important that I lean into the awkward conversations, that I lean into the awkward, that I lean into the hurt feelings in regard, to my daughter. Because I know that on the other side of it, I'm going to grow. I'll probably grow more in a conversation with her because I'm continually working on, trying to get better with processing stuff. Mm-hmm. And then by me learning, and she's learning too,
Yeah.
I had a mom ask me about a week ago. She said, I know that we're supposed to trust God, but how do you how does it work between trusting God and your responsibility with things? Like where does the tension lie in that? Like is there a balance? Because she just felt a deep need to be responsible and to do all the things right. Mm-hmm. It was on her shoulders, right?
Yeah.
And as I thought more about that question, I just to me it makes sense if there's just like this cycle of things that you lean into. And this is what I told her. I said, you pray first.
Yeah.
You ask for wisdom.
Right.
Because God knows your kids way better than you do. Whatever they're going through or facing, He absolutely knows it. And then you do your part. Yeah. Whatever that is, you do your part. That doesn't negate you of any responsibility. Right. You do your job.
Yeah.
And then you trust God. You do what you can, and then you trust God. Mm-hmm. And then you pray for wisdom. You do what you can, and then you trust God.
Yeah.
And it's this cycle, never-ending cycle.
Right.
And I think that's helped me in regards to parenting. And so.
Well, you have to listen, right? And you have a man who God asks, hey, give up everything, go sell everything, come with me, right? And you're either going to be willing or you're not. So is there a responsibility there? Yes, there is. God is asking you to abandon everything that this world has for you and follow Him.
Yeah.
That's your responsibility. He takes care of the rest.
Yeah.
His promise is, if you follow me, I got you.
Yeah.
And we have to be faithful enough to do what it is that He asks of us and then turn it over to Him and surrender.
Yep.
And so
that's toughness.
That is 100% toughness.
Yeah, for sure.
And not easy to do, by the way. Like, you can do as many curls or ab work as you want. And you, like you said, it's limited. The amount of strength or quote unquote toughness that it's limited. But when you go to the Father, it's limitless.
Yeah.
It's tough to relinquish it and give it away. But once you do, he's got you.
Yep. Yeah. You said exactly that on the last podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that rings true. So, well, this has been a great conversation on toughness. Guys, thanks for listening in on episode 25. We really hope that we're an asset to you guys just in regards to just parenting through all the things. So thanks for listening. If you haven't yet, subscribe. And if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear that too.
Yeah.
So thanks, guys, for joining. We'll see you later.
Have a great week.